531 PI.
You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. I'm William Toretti. It's great to have your company this Thursday. Now, Veterans Minister and Associate Defence Minister Penk is heading to Niue, of course, paying tribute to the incredible contributions of Niuean service personnel to New Zealand and the Pacific this ANZAC Day. From the First World War to the Second, Niue's legacy, of course, is bravery and sacrifice. He joins me now. Good morning to you.
Morena, thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming on. Hey, look, let's start with the obvious. I mean, the significance of this trip and why.
Yeah, well, I'll be going on behalf of the New Zealand government and the people of New Zealand to honour the service and the sacrifice that you've quite rightly already referenced, the people of Niue, both historic in the First World War, sending young men, and it would have been young men in those days, but more recently men and women through the Second World War and into the contemporary times. It was just the other day, actually, by coincidence, I met a Niuean heritage New Zealander who was serving with the New Zealand Defence Force, with the Navy. In fact, his son is in the Army too. And that strong, proud relationship between our two nations continues, including in defence terms. So to honour that historically and also in terms of the contemporary service is something that I'm going to be very pleased to do.
In terms of your conversations on the ground, no doubt you'll be interacting with, say, the Prime Minister over there, etc. Can you give us a bit of an understanding as to what you'll be up to?
Yeah, well, partly it's just developing and deepening that relationship between the two nations. The Honourable Dalton Tangalangi was in New Zealand, in fact, a month or so ago, and I was very honoured to be able to meet him and members of his delegation at that time. And he also met with our Prime Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister of this nation too. So it's about that ongoing dialogue and cooperation as compared with any particular event, although those government-to-government relations, of course, will be timed very nicely to enable me to be there for ANZAC Day to make that particular remembrance for their veterans.
How would you characterise our current relationship with the Pacific? And I suppose this, as you've pointed out, is an important trip that you're heading over to, Niue, of course, and its connection to New Zealand. But it has been frosty, say, for example, with the Cook Islands in recent months because it's been aligning itself, some would argue, with China. So how would you characterise our relationship with the Pacific?
Well, I think in the Pacific, we've traditionally had really good, strong, warm ties, partnerships, including trade, a shared interest in the environment, people-to-people links, and as we've already talked about, defence and security. I think that relationship is very strong in the Pacific in general, where there are particular examples of New Zealand engagement needing to recognise the particular factors of the year 2025 and other regional and global players' interests in the region. Everyone actually in the globe understands the significance of the region. So New Zealand needs to be present and active and engaged so that for nations like Niue, we continue that strong relationship.
Yeah, in your veterans capacity, I suppose, how would you, in some ways, shape and form, some would argue that perhaps the significance of ANZAC has been lost. Are you getting that kind of sense yourself?
Yeah, I really respectfully, I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think the significance of ANZAC is being lost. I think the further that we travel in time from the period in which the First World War, of course, giving rise to the name ANZAC with that Gallipoli campaign, and of course the Second World War, in which many of my generation's grandparents and New Zealanders and Niueans and others of that generation experienced. So we had those direct links, and the further we travel from that point, I suppose the danger is that we do lose the memory of what exactly was sacrificed in terms of the people who went overseas, the effect on those back home, and of course the horror and the terror of war. And of course, it's not about glorifying conflict, actually quite the opposite. But I think we have a different kind of remembrance now. We need to acknowledge contemporary veterans, people who have served recently, those that are still in uniform, and of course understand the evolving nature of the Defence Force and the ways that it can help out, for example, in the Pacific, and in New Zealand too, for that matter, in the case of natural disasters, search and rescue, and other humanitarian-based type operations.
Yeah, well, fair point, well raised. Look, with that in mind, I suppose we just had Carmel Sepuloni talking about ANZAC commemorations before you, and she did highlight perhaps the Pacific military in specific, getting specific here, should be receiving more recognition than it does. Speaking about today as well. But what do you make of that?
Yeah, without having heard Kamal's remarks, I'd obviously agree that we need to recognise and celebrate and thank, actually, those who have served New Zealand or their own nations, and of course recognising the close relationships. Again, mentioning Niue specifically, as I'm about to be on my way there. Within the realm of New Zealand, of course, a very special close connection. But I think anyone who points out that we can do more to honour that historic service and sacrifice, but also think in the present day what's going to be needed. In terms of equipping our personnel, which is important for the interests and ideals of New Zealand and the Pacific, but also as a matter of, respecting and protecting our troops, because it is a difficult and dangerous world out there. So I'd agree with anyone, including across the political aisle, who would make those points.
The recent defence spend that was announced by the government a few weeks ago, I think it's a good thing in the sense of there's no denying geopolitics in the Pacific. It's becoming increasingly volatile between, say, China trying to creep in with its influence. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
Yeah, I mean, certainly without being more specific than we need to about the nature of a threat or threats, it's impossible to predict with accuracy what will be the case in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And of course, the defence spending decisions being made in that capability plan will relate to a long period of time. So while it's possible to identify that there are particular pressures and challenges in our region right now, we also need to understand that we don't know what world we'll be living in the coming decades. So we need to have a very broad-based approach in terms of the kind of capability we need, starting with the point, most obviously, we are a Pacific nation. We are a maritime nation. So much of our domain is blue on the map, not green. And we need to understand what that means for the constructive role we can play in this part of the world.
Concerns we've heard about, say, China increasing its militarization in the Pacific. What do you make of that?
Well, I think we're rightful to be vigilant and understand, the interests that many nations will have in this part of the world. But I think we would be wise to think about the things that we can control. We can control the fact that we've got good relationships, or at least that we, play our part on one side of those relationships, interacting with the Pacific Islands. If we're a reliable, good faith, engaged partner with all those types of links that we've already referenced, then that will stand us in good stead and be doing the right thing, of course, for our Pacific neighbours, friends and family too.
Couldn't agree more, Minister. Hey, thank you very much for your time and for coming on our show as well. Really appreciate it, and enjoy Niue. That is Chris Penk. You're listening to Pacific.